I'm Alice, 30, female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband, Tom, in a house that felt more like his family's showroom than our home. By day, I'm a DevOps engineer, a job that requires logic, precision, and the ability to see how complex systems connect, skills that would soon become invaluable in my personal life. My world was supposed to be one of order and predictability, but I was about to discover that the most chaotic code I'd ever have to debug was my own marriage. It all started with a single, empty place at a dinner table, a deliberate omission that unraveled a web of deceit so intricate it would have made my most complex projects look like child's play. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Life with Tom had always been curated. He was a financial analyst, a man who viewed the world through spreadsheets and calculated risks. Our relationship, I was beginning to realize, was just another asset to be managed. We met in college, a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale. He was charming, ambitious, and came from a family that seemed to have stepped out of a magazine. His mother, Karen, was the quintessential matriarch, her home always immaculate, her smile always perfectly in place. His younger sister, Jessica, was her mini-me, a wedding planner who orchestrated perfect moments for others while ensuring her own life was a meticulously filtered Instagram feed. I, on the other hand, was different. I found beauty in code, in the elegant logic of a well-designed system. My world was one of function over form. I didn't care for the endless brunches, the designer labels, or the carefully staged family photos that Karen and Jessica adored. At first, they seemed to find my quirks endearing. "Oh, Alice is so focused on her little computer things," Karen would say with a tight smile, as if I were a child with a peculiar hobby. Tom would laugh and wrap his arm around me, positioning me as his brilliant, slightly eccentric wife. It was a role I played along with, believing their condescension was just a clumsy form of affection. The family's golden child was, without a doubt, Jessica. She was getting married to a man who was essentially a carbon copy of Tom, wealthy, handsome, and from the right kind of family. The wedding was all anyone could talk about for a year. It wasn't just an event, it was a production orchestrated by Jessica herself, with Karen as her executive producer. Every detail was scrutinized, every decision debated in the family group chat, a digital space I increasingly felt like an intruder in. My opinions on flower arrangements or font choices for the invitations were politely ignored. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, dear," Jessica had texted once when I suggested a more modern design. "This is a classic affair." I tried to be the supportive sister-in-law. I offered my technical skills to help create a wedding website, a streamlined RSVP system. "Oh, that's sweet," Jessica had said, her voice dripping with saccharine dismissal over the phone. "But my vendors have all that handled. We don't want it looking like a tech conference." The insult was subtle, but it landed. To them, my career was a novelty, not a source of expertise. It was something that made me different, and in their world, different was a liability. Tom was oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant. Whenever I tried to express my feelings of being an outsider, he'd brush them off. "That's just how they are, honey. They're just excited about the wedding." He'd kiss my forehead, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring but felt increasingly like a dismissal. He loved me, I thought, but he loved the idea of a conflict-free life more. He existed on the surface, never wanting to dive into the messy depths of human emotion. He was a boat sailing on a calm sea, and he'd do anything to avoid a storm, even if it meant ignoring the leaks in his own vessel. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of frantic activity. My involvement was limited to nodding along during dinner conversations and writing checks for the endless stream of bridal showers and gift registries. I felt like a spectator, a plus, one in my own family. The one person who seemed to notice was Emily, Tom and Jessica's cousin. Unlike the rest of them, Emily had a genuine warmth. A talented graphic designer, she often felt just as out of place in her family's rigid social structure. During one particularly excruciating family dinner, where Jessica spent 30 minutes dissecting the exact shade of ivory for her tablecloths, Emily caught my eye from across the table and gave a slight, conspiratorial eye roll. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. It was a lifeline, a silent acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the only one who saw the absurdity of it all. Later that evening, while helping clear the dishes, Emily cornered me in the kitchen. "You have the patience of a saint," she whispered, a wry smile on her face. I let out a laugh, the first genuine one of the night. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who speaks the same language," she replied. The language of "can we please talk about something real?" We bonded in that moment, two islands of sincerity in a sea of superficiality. It was a friendship I would soon desperately need. But for now, I was still playing my part, smiling and nodding, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, completely unaware that the door was about to be flung open by the one person I was supposed to be able to trust the most. The rehearsal dinner was to be held at a ridiculously expensive restaurant overlooking the city skyline. It was the kind of place with white tablecloths so crisp they could cut you, and waiters who moved with the silent, unnerving grace of predators. This was Jessica's domain. She had chosen the venue, the menu, the seating chart. It was the final dress rehearsal for her grand performance, and every detail had to be perfect. Tom and I arrived together, him looking effortlessly dapper in a tailored suit, me feeling slightly self-conscious in a cocktail dress I'd spent too much on. As we walked in, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and forced pleasantries. Jessica, glowing in a white dress that was practically a wedding gown itself, greeted us with air kisses. "You made it," she squealed, her eyes darting around the room, already assessing, managing, and judging. Karen was right behind her, her face a mask of proud delight. A hostess with a clipboard led the guests to their tables. When our turn came, she scanned the list, her brow furrowing slightly. "Tom, you're at the head table, of course," she said, pointing to the long, elaborately decorated table where the bridal party was seated. Then she looked at me, her eyes flicking back down to the chart, and, "Alice, yes, you are at table 9. I felt a cold prickle of confusion. Table 9. It was in the far back corner of the room, tucked away near the service entrance. It was the table for distant relatives and courtesy invites. "There must be a mistake," I said, forcing a laugh. "I'm with Tom." The hostess offered a tight, apologetic smile. "The seating chart was arranged by the bride. I'm afraid there's no mistake." Tom, who had already started walking towards the head table, turned back, a look of mild annoyance on his face. "What's the hold up?" I looked at him, my voice barely a whisper. "They have me at a table in the back, away from you." His annoyance melted into a familiar, placating smile. "Oh, honey, it's probably just an oversight. Jessica's been so stressed. Don't make a scene. Just find your seat. I'll come over and see you in a bit." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on me. I felt a flush of humiliation so intense it was almost dizzying. It wasn't an oversight. This was a statement. This was a deliberate, calculated act of exclusion. I slowly made my way to table 9, my heels sinking into the plush carpet like I was walking through quicksand. The table was filled with people I barely knew, a great aunt, some second cousins. They offered polite smiles, but their curiosity was palpable. The groom's wife, sitting alone at the back table. The gossip was already writing itself. I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I texted Tom. "This is not okay. This is humiliating. You need to fix this." I watched him at the head table, laughing at something the best man said. He glanced at his phone, read my message, and then typed a quick reply. My phone buzzed. "Don't ruin Jessica's night. We'll talk later." Ruin Jessica's night. The words felt like a slap. My own feelings, my own dignity, were secondary to his sister's perfectly curated evening. I looked over at the head table again and saw Jessica lean over to whisper something in her mother's ear. They both glanced in my direction, a shared, secret smile playing on their lips. It was then that the cold prickle of confusion solidified into a hard, icy certainty. This wasn't just Jessica. This was a coordinated effort. I spent the next hour in a daze. I picked at the ridiculously overpriced sea base on my plate, the food tasting like ash in my mouth. I made stilted conversation with my table mates, my mind a million miles away. Tom never came over, not once. He was absorbed in his role as the proud older brother, raising his glass for toasts, laughing and celebrating, while his wife sat in Siberia. The final straw came during the speeches. When Tom stood up to speak, he talked about his wonderful family, about how proud he was of his little sister. He told charming childhood anecdotes. He praised her fiancé. He toasted their future. He never once mentioned my name. It was as if I didn't exist. I was not part of this family he was so proud of. I was an accessory he had forgotten to wear for the evening. That's when Emily found me. She had been at a different table with other cousins, and she slid into the empty chair beside me, her expression a mixture of pity and anger. "I am so sorry, Alice," she said, her voice low. "This is unbelievable." I looked at her, the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally breaking. A single tear traced a hot path down my cheek. "They hate me," I whispered, the admission tasting bitter. "No," Emily said fiercely, placing a hand on my arm. "They don't know you, they're threatened by you. You're smart, you're independent, and you don't need their approval. They can't stand it." She was right. It wasn't about me not liking brunch. It was about me not fitting into the box they had designated for me. And tonight, they had made it clear that if I wouldn't stay in my box, they would simply remove me from the display altogether. I looked back at the head table, at my husband laughing without a care in the world, and a new feeling began to bloom in the pit of my stomach, pushing aside the hurt and humiliation. It was a cold, quiet rage. The kind of rage that doesn't scream but plans. They wanted to make me invisible. They had no idea what I could do in the dark. I left the rehearsal dinner without saying goodbye. I slipped out the side entrance while Jessica was cutting into a comically large cake, a trial run for the main event. I didn't text Tom. I just got in my car and drove, the city lights blurring into streaks of angry color through my tear-filled eyes. When I got home, the silence of our house was deafening. It was a house filled with things Karen had helped us pick out, things that fit the young professional couple. Aesthetic they so approved of. But tonight, it felt empty of any real warmth, of any real partnership. Tom stumbled in 2 hours later, smelling of champagne and self-satisfaction. He found me in the living room, sitting in the dark. "There you are," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You just disappeared. That was a little rude, don't you think?" The utter lack of self-awareness in his statement was staggering. "Rude," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "You want to talk about rude, Tom? Your wife was seated next to the kitchen. Your wife was publicly shunned by your family, and you did nothing. You said nothing. You are nothing." The accusation sobered him up instantly. "Oh, come on, Alice. You're being dramatic. It was a seating chart mix-up. Stop lying to me." I snapped, standing up to face him. "I saw Jessica and your mother look at me and smile. This was planned. This was a message. And you, my loving husband, co-signed it." He had the grace to look ashamed, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by defensiveness. What was I supposed to do? Start a massive fight at my sister's rehearsal dinner? It was her night. It was supposed to be our life. I countered, my voice breaking. "When did us become less important than them?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew all too well. It was his go-to move when a conversation became too difficult, too emotional. "You're just determined to hate my family," he muttered. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm just starting to see them for who they really are, and I'm starting to see you." The fight went on for another hour, a circular, pointless argument that solved nothing. He accused me of being too sensitive. I accused him of being a coward. In the end, we retreated to separate rooms, the silence between us now a chasm. I lay awake all night, replaying every moment, every subtle insult, every dismissive gesture from the past few years. They weren't isolated incidents. They were data points, forming a pattern of disrespect and manipulation I had been too blind or too willing to see. The seating chart wasn't the attack, it was the declaration of war. The next morning, the day of the wedding, I went into autopilot. I had a role to play, the supportive wife. Tom was the best man. I was a guest. I put on the dress, did my makeup, and pasted a serene smile on my face. But underneath, the gears were turning. I'm a DevOps engineer. My job is to find system vulnerabilities. I analyze logs, I trace dependencies, I find the single point of failure that can bring a whole structure crashing down. My family life, my marriage, was a system, and it was critically flawed. It was time to run a diagnostic. My first move was to call Emily. I needed an ally, someone on the inside. I caught her before she left for the pre-wedding festivities. "I need your help," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I'm not crazy, right? This isn't normal." "No, Alice, it's a 5-alarm fire of toxic behavior." She confirmed, her voice filled with a righteous anger that soothed my own. "What do you need?" "I need to understand why," I said. "This feels personal. It feels like more than just me not fitting in." I told her about the look Jessica and Karen had shared. Emily was quiet for a moment. "Jessica can be competitive," she said carefully, "and my Aunt Karen has always seen Tom as her golden boy. Maybe she never thought anyone was good enough for him." It was a plausible theory, but it felt incomplete. This level of malice had to be rooted in something deeper. There's something else. I pushed. Something I'm missing. Emily sighed. Look, I don't know for sure, but there have been whispers, for a while now. Jessica has been complaining to anyone who will listen about how much money Tom spends on you. Your vacations, your house. She feels entitled to a certain family standard of wedding, and she thinks you're the reason. She's had to cut back. The pieces clicked into place. It was about money. It was always about money. We were comfortable, yes, but we weren't extravagant. Tom and I both had good jobs, but in his family's eyes, my income was irrelevant. Tom's money was family money, and I was seen as an expense, a drain on the resources that should have been funneled into Jessica's fantasy wedding. The empty chair wasn't just an insult, it was a financial statement. It was their way of saying, you don't contribute, so you don't deserve a seat at the table. The revelation was sickening. They hadn't just insulted me, they had reduced my entire worth in their son's life to a balance sheet. In Tom, had he been a part of this? Had he been complaining about our expenses to them behind my back? The thought made my blood run cold. Emily, I said, my voice firm, all traces of hurt replaced by cold resolve. I need you to do something for me at the wedding. Keep your ears open. Pay attention to what Jessica and Karen are saying. I have a feeling they're not as clever as they think they are. Consider it done, Emily said. It's time someone held them accountable. We hung up, and I took a deep breath. The mask of the smiling, supportive wife was back in place, but behind it, the engineer was at work. I had identified the bug in the system. Now, I just needed to find the exploit. The wedding was as opulent and soulless as I had imagined. Flowers dripped from every surface, a string quartet played blandly beautiful music, and hundreds of guests mingled, their conversations a low, meaningless hum. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, exchanging pleasantries, accepting compliments on my dress, all while my mind was racing. I watched Tom at the altar, standing beside his sister, a proud smile plastered on his face. I felt a profound sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. During the reception, I put my plan into motion. While Tom was busy with his best man duties, I feigned a headache and told him I was going to get some air. Instead, I made my way to the bridal suite. It was empty, a chaotic explosion of tulle, makeup, and half-empty champagne glasses. Jessica's laptop was open on the vanity table. It was a calculated risk, but I was counting on her arrogance. People like Jessica, who believe they are untouchable, rarely bother with something as mundane as password. Protecting their session, I was right. The screen flickered to life with a single touch. My heart pounded in my chest, but my fingers were steady as they flew across the keyboard. My job has taught me to be efficient under pressure. I wasn't looking for a needle in a haystack. I was looking for a specific log file. I started with her email. A quick search for my name yielded nothing interesting, just the usual passive-aggressive family correspondence. Then I checked her messaging apps, and there it was, a river of digital poison. The primary chat was between Jessica, Karen, and, to my horror, Tom. It stretched back for months. It started with petty complaints. Alice is wearing that to the engagement party, Jessica had written, accompanied by a photo of me she must have taken on the sly. So classless. Karen had replied with a string of vomiting emojis. Tom's contribution was a weak, be nice. But as I scrolled, it got worse. There were detailed discussions about our finances. Tom, are you sure you can afford that new car for Alice? Karen had written, the wedding is costing a fortune, you know. Tom's reply made my stomach clench. I'm handling it, Mom. Don't worry. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't told them it was our money, our decision. He had placated them, validating their belief that I was some kind of financial burden. Then I found the conversations about the rehearsal dinner. It was exactly as I'd suspected, cold, calculated, and malicious. Let's put her at table 9. Jessica had written, it will be hilarious. She needs to be put in her place. Karen had replied, perfect. She needs to understand her position. And Tom had simply replied, whatever you think is best, Jess. I don't want any drama. No drama. He had sold my dignity for the price of avoiding a difficult conversation. But the real bombshell, the one that blew my entire world apart, was in a separate folder. It was labeled Wedding Contracts. Jessica, being a wedding planner, had handled all her own vendor agreements. I clicked open the file for the caterer. The invoice was astronomical, far more than the budget she had been crying poor about. I dug deeper, opening the contract for the florist, the band, the venue. A pattern emerged. Each contract had 2 versions. One was the official version with an inflated price. The other, attached in the email correspondence with the vendor, was the actual aversion, showing a significantly lower price, often with a line item for a planner's commission, or a referral fee, paid directly to a holding company I'd never heard of. My blood turned to ice. Jessica wasn't just overcharging her own wedding, she was creating a false narrative of financial strain. She was presenting these inflated invoices to the family, to Tom, to her fiancé's parents, to everyone contributing, and pocketing the difference. The "we have to cut back because of Alice's story" wasn't just a petty jab, it was the cover for her fraud. She was stealing from her own family, using me as the scapegoat. My hands were shaking as I used my phone to take pictures of everything. The chats, the fake invoices, the real ones, the bank details for the shell company. I worked quickly, systematically, a cold fury guiding my actions. This was the exploit. This was the vulnerability that would bring the entire corrupt system crashing down. Just as I was about to close the laptop, a new message popped up on the screen. It was from Emily, there at the bar. She wrote, "Karen is complaining that the champagne isn't the expensive brand Jessica told them they were paying for. Jessica just told her to shut up and drink it." It was the final piece of confirmation I needed. I slipped out of the room, my phone heavy in my purse with the evidence. I walked back into the reception, my serene smile back in place. But now, it wasn't a mask for my pain. It was the calm, placid surface of a deep, dark lake, hiding the monster that was about to rise from its depths. Jessica wanted a memorable wedding. I was about to give her one. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in controlled rage. I went home from the wedding with Tom, playing the part of the slightly sulky but ultimately forgiving wife. He was drunk and self-congratulatory, basking in the success of the event. He apologized half-heartedly for the rehearsal dinner, blaming it on Jessica being a bridezilla, an excuse that was now so laughably inadequate it was almost insulting. I just nodded, letting him believe his token apology was enough. I let him fall into a deep, alcohol-induced sleep, while my mind worked with the furious precision of a supercomputer. My first step was to secure the evidence. I transferred the photos from my phone to a secure, encrypted cloud server, creating multiple backups. Then I began to build my case. As a DevOps engineer, I live and breathe data. I started by investigating the holding company Jessica was using to funnel the kickbacks. A quick search of public business records revealed it was a shell corporation registered to a P.O. box with a single director, Jessica herself. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. Her arrogance was, as I had suspected, her greatest vulnerability. Next, I cross-referenced the invoices. I created a spreadsheet, a document of pure, irrefutable logic. Column A, the vendor. Column B, the fraudulent amount charged to the family. Column C, the actual amount paid. Column D, the difference, the amount Jessica had stolen. The total at the bottom of column D was staggering. It was a 5-figure sum, more than enough to constitute felony fraud. But simply exposing the fraud wasn't enough. That was Jessica's crime. Tom's crime was one of betrayal, of a quiet, insidious complicity that was, to me, even more unforgivable. I scrolled back through the chat logs I had photographed. His words, "Whatever you think is best. Don't ruin Jessica's night." "I'm handling it, Mom," painted a portrait of a man who had systematically chosen his family of origin over his wife. He had allowed them to mock me, to isolate me, and to use me as a scapegoat for their own greed. The financial fraud was the weapon, but Tom's betrayal was the wound. My plan had to address both. I needed an ally to act as a witness, a neutral third party who could validate my claims. Emily was the obvious choice. I called her the next morning, the day after the wedding, when Jessica and her new husband were safely on a plane to their honeymoon in the Maldives, paid for with stolen money. I laid out the entire story for Emily, my voice cold and clinical as I detailed the fake invoices and the shell company. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line, that conniving greedy. She finally sputtered, her voice a mixture of shock and fury. "I knew she was selfish, but this is evil. I need you to be there when I confront them," I said. "I need someone who isn't me or Tom to hear this. I need a voice of reason. I'll be there," she said without hesitation. "Just tell me when and where." The final piece of my plan was the most difficult, the delivery mechanism. I could have just sent a mass email with all the evidence, a digital bomb that would have incinerated their family relationships from a distance. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to watch the carefully constructed masks of superiority and entitlement crumble. I decided to call a family meeting. I told Tom I wanted to clear the air after the misunderstanding at the rehearsal dinner. I said I wanted to move forward, and the only way to do that was to have an honest conversation with him and his mother. My apparent willingness to take the high road appealed to his avoidant nature. He readily agreed, relieved that he wouldn't have to deal with a hysterical wife anymore. He called Karen, who, after some initial reluctance, agreed to come over. She likely assumed she was coming to witness my formal surrender, to watch me apologize for making a scene, and accept my place in the family hierarchy. The stage was set. The players were assembled. I had built the architecture of their downfall with the same meticulous care I used to design a fault-tolerant cloud infrastructure. It was robust, it was scalable, and it was about to be deployed. The atmosphere in our living room was thick with tension. It was the Sunday evening after the wedding. Karen sat primly on the edge of the sofa, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. Tom paced nervously by the fireplace, adjusting his watch, avoiding my gaze. I had asked Emily to arrive a few minutes after Karen, wanting to make it clear that this was not a private family squabble but a formal proceeding. When the doorbell rang and Emily walked in, the look of surprise on Karen's face was immensely satisfying. "Emily, what a surprise," Karen said, her voice tight. "Alice thought it would be good to have you here," Tom explained weakly, as a neutral party. I gestured for everyone to sit down. I remained standing, a deliberate choice to control the room. I had placed a tablet on the coffee table, its screen dark. "Thank you all for coming." I began, my voice calm and steady. "Tom, you said you wanted to avoid drama. Karen, you believe in the importance of a family's position. I am here to talk about both of those things." I looked directly at Tom. "Let's start with the rehearsal dinner. I was publicly humiliated. When I came to you, my husband, for support, you told me not to ruin your sister's night. You sided with them. You have consistently, for years, allowed your family to disrespect me, and you have not once defended me." Tom opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "I am not finished." I then turned to Karen. "You have treated me with condescension and contempt since the day we met. You see me as an outsider, a drain on your son. You, along with your daughter, orchestrated a cruel and deliberate act to isolate me, and you enjoyed it." Karen scoffed, her face a mask of indignation. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You've always been overly sensitive, have I?" I asked, a thin smile on my lips. I picked up the tablet and tapped the screen. The first image that appeared was a screenshot of the chat between her, Jessica, and Tom. The one where they planned my seating arrangement. I read Jessica's words aloud. "Let's put her at table 9. It will be hilarious. She needs to be put in her place." Karen's face went white. Tom looked like he had been punched in the stomach. "Alice, how did you get that?" he stammered. "That's not important." I said coolly, "What's important is the truth, but this petty high school bullying is just the appetizer." I swiped the screen. The spreadsheet I had created appeared, detailing the fraudulent invoices. "Let's talk about the real reason you were so keen to put me in my place. You needed a scapegoat." I walked them through it, line by line. I explained the fake invoices, the hidden kickbacks, the shell company registered in Jessica's name. With each swipe of the screen, another piece of evidence appeared: the real contracts, the bank statements, the business registration. Emily, who had been listening in horrified silence, let out a gasp. "Oh my God," she whispered. Karen was speechless, her face a crumpled mess of disbelief and dawning horror. She was not horrified by the crime, I realized, but by the fact that they had been caught. Tom just stared at the tablet, his face ashen. The perfect, curated world he had worked so hard to maintain had just been firebombed. "She stole from all of you," I said, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent room. "She stole from her own fiancé's family, and she used me as the cover story. She told you she was cutting back, that I was the reason she couldn't have her dream wedding, all while she was lining her pockets." I looked at Tom, my eyes boring into his. "And you let her. You complained to them about our finances, making me out to be some kind of gold digger, validating their narrative. You helped her create the lie that she used to defraud your entire family." I let the accusation hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Tom looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. "Alice, I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea about the money. It doesn't matter." I finally roared, the calm facade shattering to reveal the raw fury beneath. "You knew they were cruel to me. You knew they were ostracizing me. You chose their comfort over my dignity, their lies over our marriage. The fraud is just the rotten fruit of the poisoned tree you helped plant." I took a deep breath, regaining my composure. "So, here are your options," I said, my voice once again cold and business-like. Option 1, you tell everyone the truth. You tell Jessica's new in-laws, you tell the entire family. You pay back every cent she stole, and you, Tom, will file for divorce, and in the proceedings, I will get this house and a very, very generous settlement in exchange for my silence on the felony. Fraud? I paused, letting the weight of the word felony sink in. Option 2, you do nothing, and I will take this evidence to Jessica's in-laws, and then I will take it to the district attorney. Your precious daughter will start her new married life with a criminal investigation. Your family name will be dragged through the mud. The choice is yours. Karen started to sob, a series of dry, racking heaves. Tom just stood there, broken. In that moment, he was no longer the charming, confident man I had married. He was just a weak little boy who had been caught in a lie. I'll raise a final toast, I said, picking up a glass of water from the table, to transparency and to consequences. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but a slow, controlled demolition. Karen, faced with the utter ruin of her family's reputation, chose the path of least public resistance. She and Tom agreed to my terms. The call to Jessica, who was lounging on a beach in the Maldives, was apparently a short and brutal one. There was screaming, there were threats, but faced with the evidence, she had no choice but to capitulate. The money, every last stolen cent, was wired back to the respective family members within 48 hours, with a flimsy excuse about vendor rebates and accounting errors. No one believed the lie, but it was a convenient fiction that allowed the families to avoid a full-blown war. Tom moved out the next day. He didn't fight me on the divorce terms. He packed a bag in silence, his face a hollow mask of defeat. The only thing he said to me before he left was, "I really did love you." I didn't respond. His love was a conditional clause, not a foundational principle. It wasn't strong enough to build a life on. The house, once a showroom for his family's taste, suddenly felt like my own. I spent the first week of my new life purging it of their influence, packing away the generic art and the soulless decorative objects, letting the rooms breathe. Emily was my rock through it all. She helped me find a lawyer and was a constant source of support, her righteous indignation on my behalf a comforting balm. You didn't just expose a thief, she told me over coffee one afternoon. You dismantled a corrupt system. They've been operating like this for years, bullying anyone who doesn't fit their perfect little mold. You were the first one with the skills and the courage to fight back. The divorce was surprisingly swift. Tom, under pressure from his mother to make the problem go away, agreed to everything. The house was signed over to me, along with a settlement that ensured my financial independence for the foreseeable future. I never saw Karen again. According to Emily, she became something of a recluse, too humiliated to face the social circle she had worked so hard to dominate. Jessica's fate was in many ways the most ironic. While she avoided criminal charges, her reputation was destroyed. Her new in-laws, now fully aware of her deceit, treated her with icy disdain. Her wedding planning business, which relied on word-of-mouth referrals within that tight-knit community, dried up overnight. No one wanted to hire a planner who had defrauded her own family. She had her perfect wedding, but it had cost her everything else. She was trapped in a beautiful marriage with a family that now despised her, a gilded cage of her own making. As for me, I found a freedom I hadn't realized I was missing. My life was no longer about managing other people's expectations. It was about building my own systems on my own terms. I excelled at work, taking on new projects with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. I reconnected with old friends, the kind of people with whom I could have real conversations, not just performative ones. I started to build a new foundation for my life, one based on authenticity, logic, and mutual respect. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that empty chair at the rehearsal dinner. It was meant to be an act of erasure, a way to make me feel small and insignificant, but in the end it did the opposite. It set me free. It was the catalyst that forced me to debug my own life, to identify the toxic code that was causing a critical system failure. They tried to remove my seat from the table, so I did the only logical thing. I flipped the whole damn table over and built a better one for myself.